The soldiers of the 1st Infantry Division, currently deployed in Saladin Province, north of Baghdad, Iraq, are facing a new battlefield. The old battlefields were city streets and dusty villages, where soldiers conducted raids and hunted down insurgent cells. The traditional way to think of a battlefield is with a map of key terrain, but the new battlefield has little to do with cities, rivers, bridges, and roads. The map of the new battlefield is based on people, elected politicians, tribal leaders, and Iraqi and military police officers. The tactical terrain is now offices and hospitality rooms of Iraqi leaders. This shift has forced the officers of the 1st Infantry Division to adopt new tactics and to rethink what a weapon is.
Well, I mean, I kind of go back to the root of it and reconstruct it. A war is about using violence to compel people to do what you want. And when you're not, and a weapon is a tool to force people to do what you want.
Major Pat Proctor, the operations officer for the 232 Field Artillery Battalion, designed the unit's plans for their current deployment to Iraq.
We knew really almost out from the outset that we weren't going to be coming here kicking in doors and, zipper tying folks and, rolling up bad guys. So we knew that what we were going to be doing was going to be a lot more politics and a lot more nuanced and a lot more unquantifiable than any of us, either through training or experience had really done here before.
Proctor and the officers of the 232 asked a very basic question.
What are the weapons that we're going to use to compel or influence people to do what we want?
1st Division officers often use the analogy, the commander is a weapon system.
Using the commander as a weapon system is using him to influence people to do what you want. We decide this is the person that I want to move to do this. We find out what are the levers on this guy, what are the pressure points that the commander can push in order to compel this guy to do what we want him to do.
Officers of all grades are used as weapon systems on the modern battlefield. The new battlefield is broken down along the cultural, political hierarchy of Iraq, with company commanders and platoon leaders interfacing with smaller municipal leaders and higher-ranking U.S. officers dealing with provincial officials and leaders of the larger tribes.
It's not just the battalion commander, it's also the battery commanders and the platoon leaders, and sometimes the staff. Sometimes the staff goes out and is a weapon system.
After the full enactment of the Status of Forces Agreement between the United States and the government of Iraq, the role of conventional combat units was strictly curtailed. The small company-sized outposts in the cities and villages that were built during the troop surge have been closed, and units have moved into outlying areas or back to large bases. U.S. forces can only enter populated areas with an Iraqi army or police escort. U.S. combat units no longer take direct, unilateral action like raids against the insurgents, but can still take action to mitigate threats, like this foot patrol in Tikrit, to prevent insurgents from throwing grenades at U.S. military vehicles.
What we're doing is we dismounted in it's a highly congested area. We've come through there before, and we've had RKG-3s thrown at us.
The RKG-3 grenade can pierce the armor of military vehicles. Walking on the street, soldiers can spot and thwart a potential attack.
So with us dismounting on the ground, we're walking between the vehicles to mitigate a lot of people that could hide and be able to throw things at the vehicles.
The primary battlefield for U.S. soldiers is no longer on the streets or villages. It is meetings with tribal leaders and officers of the Iraqi security forces. The new battlefield is forcing officers to navigate a complex environment in working with their Iraqi partners.
What they've known forever is socialism and tribalism.
Lieutenant Colonel Eric Timmerman was in Baghdad during the surge and now commands the 128 Infantry.
And now they've got to deal with this strange nexus of democracy, capitalism, socialism, and tribalism. Those are all problems, and it's a cultural one. It's a cultural one that is just coming to terms with its own form of government, I think.
Dealing with a complex political environment is not something most senior officers ever thought they would do.
I mean, look, we may not green suit, wearing army guys were designed to pretty much kill things and break things and do that. That's our business as infantrymen. I mean, we're really designed to bring firepower, close combat, and counterattack.
But Timmerman and his soldiers have readily adapted to the new battlefield.
I think influence now is the critical path. With our relationships with local leaders, with sheikhs, with governmental officials, with ISF counterparts. I think that's the critical path, and has always been the critical path.
These influential relationships take time to nurture. Officers and senior NCOs will spend hours talking, eating, and drinking tea. These relationships often pay off. This sheikh had direct knowledge of the location of one of the few remaining al-Qaeda cells and drew a map showing the location of the cell's safe house. In another setting, an evening cookout can involve some serious business. Part of this relationship building is understanding the hospitality-based culture of Iraqis and reciprocity. U.S. commanders will host gatherings of key Iraqis on U.S. bases and have built special rooms, like this one, that resemble the office of an Iraqi politician or military officer for those meetings. The battlefield is not limited to one-on-one engagements. Officers, like Captain Justin Daubert, commander of Battle Company, become non-voting members of groups like the Tribal Union. He sits at the front with the key sheikhs as an honored guest, but only offers advice behind the scenes.
I am not trying to push my ideas on them, not try to push anyone's ideas on them from the coalition forces or the Army. I just sit there and advise as what I think the Tribal Union should represent. And that's not my opinion, that's what they've told me. Hey, we want to have these values, to be nationalistic, to fight terrorism, to make sure that true sheikhs are in power, and then holding them to their own standards.
This low-profile, partnership approach has been a gradual reversal from the early days of the war, when U.S. officers led meetings and set the agenda. They are more likely now to sit back and use their influence after the meeting.
It's not in our nature. It's not in our nature as Americans to really do a lot of indirect approaches. I think we're take charge people. We're take action now. We'll do it. Follow me. And so it doesn't necessarily come naturally, but it is very natural, I think, in this environment in the Iraqi culture to do it that way. And if that's what they're comfortable with and that works in their environment, then I think we ought to exploit and influence that as much as possible. It's just smart. And for too long, maybe we've been just bashing our heads into the proverbial wall when could have asked the Iraqi to kind of show us where the door is at a little bit.
In this joint security meeting in Tikrit, the meeting was led by Iraqis and conducted in Arabic. The English translation only for the benefit of the Americans in attendance.
Our department. And he was working with Jassim Muhammad Jabbar. And Jassim Muhammad Jabbar, he lived in Al-Butama area.
The involvement by U.S. officers was very subtle. In this case, just offering a suggestion written on a notepad.
I think that's the critical path, and has always been the critical path. We might not have seen it or appreciated it or thought that the Iraqi way was the way to solve the problem ultimately. But I've as of late been trying to get my guys to see that getting Iraqi to identify the problem with your influence and your discussion and the way that you go about solving the problem, get him to identify the problem and then use other Iraqis to solve the problem in an Iraqi manner.
Iraqi forces are now in the lead of direct action against insurgents. The primary role of the 1st Infantry Division in Iraq today is to bring about a smooth transition to full Iraqi sovereignty. The battlefield has changed, and U.S. officers have developed new sets of tactics and weapons to be effective on the new battlefield.